Hey everyone, we'll let our newcomers find their seats, but can you guys throw me a 100 emoji if you can hear me well? Yeah, get those hundreds. All right, sick. All right, we're gonna start in 2 minutes. We'll give 2 more minutes for everyone to join the space. We're going to go through that over the course of the Twitter space. But I think to start with, it's probably best to give a bit of an intro of ourselves and the project for those who don't know us. So this project is Bricktopians. I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder of Bricktopians with Law. I'm the engine room, but Law is the polyspecial Viking octopus, the optometrist, the visionary behind everything that we build together.
That guy Law created the LaMelo Ball collectibles.
It's probably best to actually explain the project through.
He's a big dude in the NFT space.
I've spent 7 years in the blockchain space, 4 of which working in blockchain clean energy. Law's been the 3D artist behind some of the biggest names in culture, whether it be working at Yeezy, working with the late Virgil Abloh, NBA players and other cultural figures. This project, Bricktopians, was our first footprint on the world together, building something that was preposterously technical, preposterously hard to create. Really basically throwing the kitchen sink at what's possible when you combine AI, 3D and 4D art. So if you're new here, I highly recommend checking out some of our work, because what started as effectively 3D characters evolved into the first ever 4D collection, where every single piece has its own unique physics simulation that works differently and applies differently based on how that Bricktopian character is constructed. And I think it's important to understand the artwork and the effort that we put into that is more than anything just a representation of the mindset that we take when we're building. We always want to do things that haven't been done before. We want to take on challenges that sometimes people tell us are impossible or impractical or just should not be done. That's how we approach everything that we're building, and that is going to very much bleed into what we talk about here today. But it's important to understand that Bricktopians isn't just an art piece. It's the key that unlocks all the future work that comes under the optometry of Law. We are releasing many diverse NFTs, pieces of art, and new ways of interacting with the metaverse. And that's all accessed through this project, whether it be whitelist, discounts, and more. So yeah, in summary, Bricktopians is an evolving piece of art. It's a mint pass to all future work, and it's what we will use. And we will use all high-profile projects and celebrity projects, culturally significant projects, as our way of bringing attention back to what we've built here in Bricktopia. So if you haven't had a chance to catch up on the last space, or haven't heard from us in a while, it's nice to see you again. If you're new here, it's awesome that you're here to learn about us. We're building some big things, and I can't wait to talk to you about it. So we'll get into the brain boot soon, but I want to open by giving a bit of a background on the Forge. So the Brickto Forge, if you haven't heard about it, is, in my opinion, the most underrated thing about what we're building. When we think about what market mechanics, right? When we actually think about what is important in the longevity of a collection, it really comes down to 2 things, right? It's supply and demand. And that is basically that was the nucleus for the genesis of this idea. We asked ourselves, how can we create an incentive for people to continue to buy floor Bricktopians and reduce the circulating supply of the collection. I know that, for example, our market cap, if you look at it, is a couple million dollars, but that's spread across 10,000 Bricktopians. Imagine if that was all concentrated into one Bricktopian. And so I want holders to understand like that's the mindset we bring to creating long-term value in this collection. So the way the Forge works is it's a deflationary mechanism that gives Brickto holders the opportunity to get new rare traits on their Bricktopians. So effectively how it works is you get the opportunity to burn / sacrifice one of the Bricktopians that you're willing to part with for the opportunity to get a new trait that's never been seen before on your favorite Bricktopian. So I see Jarvie, for example, or Harvey has a gold Bricktopian over there. That's a really great example.
Oh my God, I'm gonna burn
$1,000
NFT for a trait right now.
Of the Bricktopian that you
But that's
hold.
why I bought one extra one.
Maintain its gold skin, its blue hair, everything that he would have purchased when thinking about that Bricktopian.
I have a super rare Bricktopian. That Hulk Hogan that I have is number 68 out of 10,000.
So that's basically
it's worth so much
that
money.
you should have going into the Forge.
I'm gonna up him with a trait for
creating an
$600
opportunity for you to burn one of your Bricktopians effectively to upgrade your Bricktopian. And so that'll all be managed through a smart contract on our upcoming Forge website. It's almost like our take on mutant serum. The difference is that this actually reduces supply for Bricktopians overall. And so if we think about this from an incentives perspective, basically we've created the incentive for, if you're a newcomer to Bricktopia and you've just bought a new Bricktopian, this is all very new. You haven't had the chance to do enough research on us. You've just come in, you've joined the community, you've been welcomed into the Discord, and you thought you were just buying a floor brick. But someone tells you your floor brick could instantly become one of the rarest bricks if you choose to. That is a powerful incentive to use the Forge. But that individual, in order to participate, has to buy another one. And not only do they have to buy another one, they have to remove one from the circulating supply. It really can't be overstated how exciting, how powerful that is. But more than that, it's just fun, right? Like when we've been thinking about the Forge, I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance to see what a Bricktopian looks like, the big brick gods, so to speak, that are the sentient bricks made out of bricks, some of the rarest in our entire collection. Seeing a Bricktopian wearing a tuxedo is quite possibly one of the most preposterous things that we've ever created. And so the Forge has been our opportunity to truly have fun with the collection and take it in a direction that like really is the full fulfillment of our vision and gives us the opportunity to keep building on that vision. And so it's been really fun to see some of the traits that are resonating most with people. Even just the backstory of how some of them have come about. Obviously, I described Laura as the optometrist. Some of you may have seen little spices in the general chat of the optometry, device that measures eyes is one of the latest eyewear pieces, for example. It's our opportunity to keep building on the story. And so I want to answer a couple of the most frequently asked questions about the Forge, because I think it's really important to understand how exactly you'll use it and the implications of certain pieces. So obviously, to begin with, as I said, we didn't, it's basically a re-randomization. So there's 55 new traits that people can collect.
The Forge is coming on February 24th.
That are added to the Bricktopians.
February 24th.
But what will happen is, and we've got an announcement up. If you're in our Discord community, I highly recommend you check it out. We can repin it so it's easy to access for everyone. But effectively, it will be a re-rolling of your traits outside of those that maintain your identity. So what do we mean by identity? Well, things like your skin pigment, orientation, species, all of those sorts of things will be maintained and held as you re-roll. But if you were wearing sunglasses, for example, or a specific hat, you might end up with your Bricktopian buried, or being rained on by an umbrella, or caught in a crowd, or getting its mugshot taken because it's been screenshotting too many NFTs. All of these things can be re-rolled, but you will keep the things that made it yours. And so that goes for including Conetopians, Decapitopians, Bricktopians, and of course, many of you that I see with a mask in here, we're conscious that that is your identity. So for these categories, we've also created unique traits that will be available to them that kind of play on those rare categories, whilst also making the ones that are applicable across the board, like being buried, for example, available to all. So yeah, it's really important to understand that identity point. A question we get a lot is, if I'm putting 2 Bricktopians in the forge, will I get to choose the one that I upgrade and the one that I burn? Of course. And we'll make sure it's explicitly clear which one is being burnt and which one is being forged, so that it's really easy to understand and everyone can have absolute confidence when using it. To that point of identity, I see one Gwei in here with gold, or should I say drip hijack scuba diving snorkel. That hijack, if you've got a hijack, that's one of the most exciting things in our collection, in my opinion. And although you may lose the snorkel, for example, or the snorkel may change into another accessory, we've ensured that hijacks are maintained. I think Cody's got preposterous bubblegum from what I can see. That could end up being a rainbow, a rainbow like mugshot stand, for example. So hijacks will be maintained across the collection. We obviously, if you've been around a while, you know that we're releasing Animatopians, which is our play on the hyper-realistic animal movement that we're seeing right now. And we're giving that away for free to all Brickto holders. Well, if you've used the Forge and you don't have a Brickto anymore, how are you going to get a free Animatopian? Obviously, we love you guys. We do everything for the community. You'll still be able to get an Animatopian. The way we're going to do that is we're going to register any wallets that use the Forge as basically a permanent whitelist, because a Brickto is a permanent whitelist to all future collections. So if you use the Forge, we want you to use it freely, and you'll still be able to access brain boots, discounts, free collections, all that, all still access after using the Forge. I'm going through my list. Those are all the key questions. We've got some that actually came up in the community questions. We'll do that later in the questions section. But that's a bit of background on the Forge and how it's going to work. And we've been talking extensively with you guys as you've raised your questions and made suggestions. We've been integrating everything that we can to make it as preposterously awesome for all of you. And so I actually have one announcement around the Forge so that no one knows about. So if you know, as I just mentioned, we're doing this Animatopians collection, this free collection of hyper-realistic animals. Those for season 2 of the Forge will be burnable for exclusive traits that will be added at a later during that season 2 of the Forge. So we've always said we want to add to it. We want this to be evolving. That's what we're going to be doing for season 2. So it's really cool that we can not only bring these collections together that might have very unique artworks from one another, but then we can bring in a deflationary mechanism into Animatopians as well. And so you can kind of see the mindset that we're taking with everything. That's how we can continue to almost like consolidate holders, build value, and make it more scarce, because we know we love scarcity in everything. That's why we care so much about rarities. So just before we get into the brain boot, I think something that's really important for us to address is we obviously are creating everything in parallel. We talk about this all the time. And so what you'll often see is we share a brain boot sneak peek, then we share a Forge trait, then we go back to a brain boot, and you see this cycle of many interesting pieces of art or works in progress that come through. And some feedback we had was, the perception looks like that you guys are almost like waking up one morning being like, I'm going to work on bricks a little bit today, or I'm going to work on animals a bit today, or I'm going to work on the Forge a bit today. And I think it's really important to kind of have a peek behind the curtain of how we work. So creatively, the Forge has been essentially ready for a very long time. Many of you will know we actually started working on this in December. And so what's great is we can continue to share unseen sneak peeks on that. But right now, it's effectively purely being built from a coding and smart contract perspective, which is me as the engine room, that's much more my world. And so when you guys are seeing new things from the brain boot or animals and we're looking at how we can incorporate animals into the brain boot, when you see all of these things, that's not because we're working on different projects. It's because the engine that we've built is firing on all cylinders. And so, but the brain boots right now, that's very much Law's domain. He's fully entrenched and ensconced in the works of making that into an awesome collection. And me, I'm working with the developers, the web designers, all of that, so that we can have a forge mechanism that works exactly how we want it to. So I think not everyone right now is in this Twitter space. So it's going to be hard to share that message. And when people are still seeing these things shared intermittently, it could give off that perception still nevertheless. So we've taken that feedback on board, and we're going to be a bit more deliberate about, in the lead up to the forge, sharing a lot more on the forge. And as we kind of cascade that into the brain boot, sharing more aggressively and marketing that a little bit more aggressively. And we think this will unite our marketing and our comms quite a lot and make everyone understand how this is being built and the level of focus that we're putting into each area. So now we're transitioning into the brain boot, which I'm sure you're much more excited to talk about, Law.
Yeah.
So for those who are new here, I'll just give the quick synopsis on it. The brain boot is a metaverse sneaker that we're launching, and I think this really ties into a lot of questions we've had around marketing and marketing the project overall. And so if we look at the Brickto Forge and the brain boot as two interesting examples, the Brickto Forge is something that I think all of us as holders have been excited about from the genesis of the project. This is something that is for us. It's something that long-term can continue to create value, continue as every newcomer comes in, they learn about the Forge. We can continue to create a supply shock and remove Bricktopians from the supply. That as a mechanism is very much for us. But if you don't know about Bricktopians, or you just see the artwork in a sea of other NFTs, it can be hard to take the time to really understand the Forge. I know that we're all learning about it together, or we're teaching you guys about it and going into detail. And so from our perspective, the Forge is something that's very much for us and sets the foundation for long-term value. Now, the brain boot, if you actually think about the segmentation of the NFT market, the segmentation of the collector mindset, the brain boot is our opportunity to bring in people from a completely different cultural mindset into our world. So that sneakerhead community, the people who may literally just only follow Hypebeast or High Snobiety, and that's where they get their source of all this information. This is our opportunity to market to new people, bring them into our Discord, into our world, and make it clear that the only pathway to this new thing that they're excited about is through a Bricktopian. Oh, what's a Bricktopian? Oh, that's actually very cool. I hadn't seen that before. And bring people over to our side. So I think that's really important to understand. We could just keep going down this brick pathway and brute force that only, but by actually speaking to new people and bringing it into new cultural realms, that's how we grow as a project. And we all that's the approach we take. We build big, knock it out of the park pieces that create this opportunity for new holders to get involved. So so I'm about to get into it with Law. As mentioned, Law's background, he's been the polymath behind, if you might have seen earlier in 2021, one of the earliest athlete collections, LaMelo Ball's record-breaking NBA individual sale. He's been foraying into the NFT space for a while, but this project was the genesis project of everything. It's why Law's into NFTs. And I think it's going to be a really cool crossover for Bricktopians.
All my LaMelo Ball NFTs sold. I just kept one of each, one red and one blue.
For starters, how you
I sold the other 5.
Yeah, it's good
for like 5x profit.
I think it would be really cool for the community to understand a little bit about your fashion work, your work with Yeezy, and some of that world, and the cultural lens that you've kind of gained from speaking to those people and working with those people.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll get into that in a minute, but even just to contextualize the genealogy of the brain boot, I've been sort of vibrating vagrantly for the better part of a decade on the sort of precipice of technology and fashion. And I remember, for instance, I'm not sure if I even told you about this project, but the sort of mother sister project of the Brain Boot was something called a Hell Heel, which I generated slinking into a mechatronics lab at university, bringing with me a sleeping bag and liquid foods, and then basically hijacking an armada of computers to simulate what was a female heel being held together by like a scrum of 30 different bodies heaving all over each other in this orgy around the foot, and then in this mechatronics lab threading together all these 3D printers to create it. And I just glamped in there chronically. Basically, I was obsessed. So I've also, before that, was trying to basically carve wooden clogs, which were generated using a CNC router to make shoes as well. So yeah, that's basically some of the the legacy of how we got to the Brain Boot. And then I guess, yeah, as you mentioned, it's probably good to contextualize. It was also, I guess, grown out of the sort of compost of the throwaway ideas from working at Yeezy for a period of time. And it's also probably interesting just to sort of outline what I was doing there. It's a question I do get a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, for some people, it's really interesting even to hear how that whole Yeezy world, and even some of the collaborations with Virgil when he was here, how those have worked, and the creative cross-pollination and everything, how that worked and what you were doing there. So maybe start with Yeezy.
Yeah, well, for instance, I was working on a number of projects at Yeezy. Sorry, someone's calling me a phone. And yeah, so one of them was for the Yeezy Gap website. Basically, what we wanted to do was to import some of the dialogue that someone has with clothing on site, IRL, and that is lost in the browser typically. So we actually we wanted to enable people to touch clothes and talk to them with their finger, basically enabling you to throw the clothes into the cart as though a game of basketball, ball into the net. And this required some pretty ruthless coding to shed all the weight to be able to have a GPU simulate that in real time. So we're actually really proud of that.
I remember seeing the behind the scenes for that project. It's almost ahead of its time because it feels like it has a part of the roots of what we've built. It was ahead of its time in that it was so exciting from a functional perspective. You could actually drag a piece of clothing off the rack and put it into a cart and it would behave like clothing. But almost like the computers that would need to run it, me on my MacBook Air, it would basically explode it.
No. The whole game was that we had to hack away all of the weight and be able. That was the point. Optimize it to run an iPhone. And so that was one project. I also, for instance, we kind of wanted to honor the landscape in the campus in Wyoming. So one of the things that we did there was basically we captured the topography of the rocks and the land, and then we threw a bunch of different biome simulations at it to generate the plants. And the way that was done was basically creating a tournament for survival. For each plant, we plugged in, each plants have different thresholds for survival. So for instance, there was acclination thresholds. So some plants are like billy goats, they can just grow on a vertical wall. Others are very particular, they need a very flat surface.
Right.
There was shade maps we had to put in because obviously there was varying levels of exposure to sun, photosynthesis, soil richness, and then obviously all the different biomes, propagation rate and range.
Yep.
And then we blew the whistle and just watched 100 years of evolution play out in this tournament where they had to compete for resources. And so, we generated a physically plausible copy of the landscape there.
All right.
So that, and then also just like some of this crowd simulation work, where if you look at the new Heaven and Hell music video by Ye, it heavily rhymes with the work that we were doing there, basically looking at like starling murmurations or schools of fish. And so basically the way that works is like each starling is looking at maybe 6 birds in front of it at like 140-degree pan of vision, and following them, and they swim around these flocks, and then interpreting that through angels. There was a lot of references which he was making, and some of it basically crowd simulation. You plug in a bunch of rules in which people, so they won't bump into each other, they'll avoid each other, and they'll have friends and different personalities, basically.
That sounds like something cool that maybe we could explore incorporating in the future.
Oh no, it's already happening in the Brain Boot.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we are doing beat simulation collecting around the Brain Boot.
Okay,
we can talk about that, but yeah,
man, very much a mastermind. So speaking of the Brain Boot, so I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but this is our foray into, we see a completely uncharted territory that is very underrepresented right now, which is this whole metaverse wearable space. And if we can make the basically Bricktopians and Law Degree and all of that history be the driving force behind the Brain Boot, as well as the gateway to the Brain Boot and any wearables released by you, we think that whilst everyone is distracted by purely just doing collections, this is the opportunity to blast past everything.
It's a Noah's Ark moment.
It's a Noah's Ark moment in history. Yeah, exactly. And where 3D animals are now commonplace, we're sure by the end of the year, everyone's going to be trying to do that, some form of metaverse wearable, but we're going to be doing it now. And planting our flag on that. And so speaking of that, the Brain Boot's quite a unique design. What can you tell us about how it's created, or how the design was created?
Well, a lot of people,
it wasn't like,
what the fuck is a Brain Boot? So, well, I guess technically it was built in concert with an algorithm by me, sort of espaliering it and sculpting it.
I witnessed you like grow it effectively.
So I guess just technically, just for your interest, the way that it is actually generated is, so you start with a sack around the foot, and there is a sleeping tube that circambulates the sack, and then basically that's relaxed, it's asleep, and I sort of wake it up and electrocute it with distress and agitation, and this pipe wants to run away from that and find rest, and it continues to just sort of like canvas the foot to find new places to exhale. And this happens until it's fully populated the surface area of the chute. So basically it is a single pipe, which if you unfurl would be a number of meters long and would connect end to end. And
so that's not people thinking like, oh, you got a picture of a brain up and you go, oh, that looks cool, I'm gonna like sculpt it. This is like quite literally like grown algorithmically. So if anyone wants to know the history of the Brain Boot, or even like when you see something that may seem like a simple design from us, it has all come from preposterous technical complexity. So I think what's really cool to give a bit of context on as well is like the way we're approaching the collection from like a rarity perspective. So naturally being a wearable, and also this fusion of, if you've seen the On Fire one, for example, like that's a really good one to look at as like as a concrete example. We're basically going to be doing a series of different Brain Boot animations with slightly different materials as well. Where it makes sense, whether the Brain Boot be made out of roads that cars are driving on top of.
We are doing that. It can follow that
exactly
a road with traffic.
Exactly. So, but these artworks are basically each individually, and actual shoes themselves are each individually made in an extremely bespoke manner. This is like love and care and high quality that's
we're literally building like a constellation of like opera level visual events. Like each one is basically its own planet with its own physical properties, like physics rules. It is literally a brain verse.
Exactly. And so there'll be this series.
These guys are the best NFT developers in the entire space.
Edition sizes, very analogous to what we've seen by Artifact or RTFKT. If you don't know that they're pronounced like that, I didn't until recently. Times Fuocious. Like, I'd encourage you to go and check that out, because what we want to see is like in these metaverse worlds, when people are wearing them, it's like, oh, you're wearing the fire shoes, I'm wearing the one that's got cars on top of it, etc., etc. And then when these are worn in these metaverse environments, they honor the rule set that is governed by them. Like, for example, Decentraland has limits on polygons and mappings and all of those sorts of things. The way we're approaching it is you'll get your NFT, which represents your ownership and your ownership of that sneaker, and we will airdrop you the latest version that we've become compatible with that honors the artwork that you're creating, that we've created for you. And so, for example, using the fire as an example, let's just say that's one of the rarest ones. There might only be 5 fire shoes, right? And there might only be 10 of the cars driving on top of its shoes versus another animation that is more commonplace. And so, similar to sneaker culture, there are a lot of Jordan 1s, for example, but there's only like a select amount of the Dior Jordan 1s. And that's probably the best way to think of this sneaker. And then for those who don't know, like, I want to use the fire as an example. Like, what goes into actually creating a shoe that is on fire? Like, and this kind of and just from like the mentality of creating these bespoke animations, some people might think that there is a fire button in these programs. Like, what goes into it?
I mean, all of them have got extensive simulations, which are the beauty of a metaverse shoe is we are trying to just make a mockery of and dunk on physics. So yeah, it's physical simulation. It's extensive.
But like the fire one, for example, like when you've described it to me, it's almost like every piece of the vision that you're creating, you almost have to go back to the drawing board and invent for that animation. Like, it's like it would be that things are as
uninvent for every shoot.
Things are as different from, okay, I'm going to create something today, I'm going to bake a cake, tomorrow I'm going to hand make a car from scratch. Like in the
we are doing the baking, the thermochemistry of bread, but making it look like a piece of exquisite jewelry in the way that bread expands and tears in quite a very specific way.
So if you're wondering about like the creative process behind some of these art pieces and why we're putting this type of effort into it, it's because like every single one is completely it lives it's in its own world. Like, almost an individual art piece shouldn't happen, and doing it in this many varied ways is truly preposterous. So I just want to recap on some of the utility of the brain brick, because I think it's always important to speak about. So it's effectively like function to begin with, like at its core, it's a functional art, that piece of art by law, which by law degree, which is in itself, if you haven't gotten a whiff of how things are created in our world, that in itself is actually preposterous. Like, the art itself is insane. And then the roadmap is to continually airdrop to people, to our collectors, based on where the space is at, which governing universe is the leading universe, which one allows us to have the most creative freedom. Like, you could see a world in which some of these metaverse worlds are installed on computers, which allows for a bit more freedom in the way we actually process graphics, rather than just being a browser app, for example, which many of them are right now. Our roadmap is to keep on, whether it be partnering with those metaverses or airdropping them to you, making your brain boot accessible to you in those environments. And then the final chapter of it is you would have seen that we've spoken a lot about physicalization, and the vision from the beginning has always been to drive towards physicalizing it. So That where this project started as just a physicalization, one piece of art, and that's it. Now it's evolved into this expansive way to represent yourself across the metaverse.
Yeah.
And you won't have to burn your NFT anymore to get access to that physical shoe. It will, but you will only be able to get the physical shoe through owning the NFT. And anyone that wants to break that ground will have to own the NFT.
Yeah.
So in terms of the benefits to our brick holders, the first one is, naturally, as we've promised from the beginning with Bricktopians, all brick holders get whitelist instantly for the brain boot. We want, in Decentraland, in all these worlds, we want to see you guys as brick holders, as our community, representing us in these worlds. So anyone who's a brick holder who wants a brain boot will get access to it 100%. And then, of course, we're going to be giving discounts to all brick holders because you guys made this possible, and naturally you should be able to get in not only ahead of everyone, but at a better price than everyone. We're going to obviously be releasing more details on price and supply and stuff closer to the date, playing with ideas about how we could potentially maybe reduce the supply even a little bit beyond the 10,000 to make it a more scarce piece of metaverse history for everyone. So timeline for that also is mid-March, just in time for NFT LA, which we've spoken about doing an event at to many of you in the chat. So if you're able to make it to LA, come over and say hey, because I think that's going to be a big cultural moment for not only just these new pieces on the horizon, but for Bricktopians as a whole. We're going to be, I don't think, so we've been doing, just to break the fourth wall on this, we've been doing this from Australia. Can you imagine actually letting us loose in an environment in the epicenter of this NFT world? We've been having to climb through doggy doors, cat flaps, up trees, and all that to get through to all these cultural figures through Instagram and everything, like all these little tunnels and methods and friends and etc. Being able to hit these people face to face is something that Laura and I have been looking forward to for a long time. So massive opportunities for marketing around that. So in terms of marketing Bricktopians and the brain boot, I think it's worth mentioning that the brain boot, some of you may actually know that we were featured in High Snobiety, which if you're not a part of like sneaker culture or fashion culture, you might know that that's one of the biggest publications in the world. And we were featured when we were undiscovered at that point. People just loved the concept, and people in this world loved the concept. And now that we're more mature, we've got much more preposterous art. We've got you guys as the community behind us. It is massive to think the waves that we can make by pushing on the cultural connections. I think we can all agree, like we hold bricks dearly, but for someone who's not really in the NFT space, it might be something that is a bridge too far for them. But to see a sneaker and that be their first NFT, and for a lot of the people that we speak to who are these cultural figures who have their own personal brands, having something that they can promote that fits their brand and links all the way back to Bricktopians, it's going to be massive for us. But the thing I think that's really worth pointing out, and this actually addresses one of the questions, we're going to get into the community questions in a sec, is that you only get one chance to make a first impression. And obviously with the complexity of what we're building, we need to mature it to a point that it is a collection. It's standardized. It looks nice. It is in the lighting format we want it to be, so that when we promote this aggressively, this thing that is going to bring new people to our community, it is well represented and makes that good first impression. Right now, we've got really cool things that we share with you guys because we want to bring you on the journey, and we think that's important for you to see the fire simulation as it unfolds and all that. But that right now would be shooting ourselves in the foot if that was the piece that we led with. We need to show the diversity of what we can create. If you've been here for a long time, I'd say this is analogous to when we pivoted towards doing the Bricktopian collection. You might have seen we shared like a helmet topian as one of our first fingernails. And then when we promoted that aggressively, people said, what do they say? Oh, this is a helmet collection. Right. Yeah, this is a helmet collection. But it's not. It was so much more than that. And it's important for us to develop that gamut, the octaves, the artillery needed to make that culture wave. So that's where we're going with this. The brain boot for us is the key to unlocking that side of the culture into our Bricktopia world. Cool. We've got a bunch of questions on Slido, so thank you to all our community members who sent those through. I think hold on. Yeah, I got them in front of me. So let's get into it. So first question we have is, when's the next big marketing push? What's the strategy? The strategy right now is to accelerate towards the Forge, obviously turn that into an event like we did with the 4D, where we saw some really cool, like we saw Lil Baby get in the Discord and hype it up. We saw a bunch of cultural figures, but we turned that into an event that was a nice, gentle floor raise, prove that we can get traction when we put ourselves into something.
More to come from Baby, by the way.
Oh, more to come from Baby. Yeah. Their team's awesome. And so obviously we're going to be accelerating towards this Forge piece, but that Forge, I have to be honest, like that is something amazing for us, and is what's going to be decreasing the supply, as I mentioned. It's going to be the brain boot that is going to be the next major push. And so we're not the type of people, the adjective animals, as we call them, who just pay for a bunch of like NFT Instagrams and just pump and dump, so to speak, like one quick hit of dopamine for the collection. It becomes a thing for a day and then it fizzles out. We swing for the fences. We build things like this preposterous brain boot collection to be a magnum opus that draws a wave of new people in. And I think Artifact, for example, or Hatebeast, or all of them, they do this really well. They go for one big swing, and that creates longevity and a big push. And so everything that we do proves that we're here every day pushing on those big things.
Every cell in our body.
Every cell in our body. Yeah. Laura's been hospitalized. We've had all sorts of crazy things from working so hard on this. But we build value through creating big things. And I think the people that are in this community or are in here every day know that that's how we do it. And of course, similarly to how we sold out in 90 seconds for our first sale, we're going to bring that same dragon blood energy to bringing that brain boot community into our world. So it said that obviously we've spoken to quite a few cultural figures, like Gary Vee, for example. And when I say Gary Vee, we mean his team and his the head of V Friends, the head of Vayner NFT, that world, as well as Lil Baby and many other cultural figures. Do we have some more plans to bring those people into our world? And so obviously, even just starting a Baby, like we're fully ensconced in conversations every day. Outside of building, Law's phone basically just doesn't stop ringing. But what I think is important to understand, and like I think when everyone thinks about it, like this makes sense, that those people really care. Everyone cares about protecting their personal brand. No one wants to be a shill for something that isn't at that point where it makes sense to cross over with their brand and it being mature. And so similar to what I was saying about the brain boot, we need to, for our next big push, when we did Bricktopians, that was a big push. We got all these big names behind it. With the brain boot, that's a cultural fit for a different world. We've got athletes already asking us from Kanye's academy, can they wear brain boots? We're talking to NBA players. We're talking to people who are in Louis Vuitton fashion shows. All those sorts of people are going to be the type of milieu that we drive and accelerate in with the brain boot. So yes, we're bringing more cultural figures into this world, into that world, and therefore into this world. We had a question about OpenSea verification. Two things. One, we were birthed at a time where OpenSea started to go, all right, that's it. We're tightening up verification unless we basically know you personally. And secondly, so we dug through those cat flaps as we naturally do and dove all the way into getting those connections. And the feedback that we got is, whilst the Forge is still operational, we can't get verified because the collection is still evolving. When we close the Forge, that's Bricktopians forever, and we'll build on it through creating new things and making them accessible. But right now, as it's evolving, we won't be verified, which makes sense if you think about it. Like even when we've been on rarity websites, I've been nervous about, they asked me to like authenticate the collection. And I'm like, I don't want to mark this as verified because how can I trust you guys are going to keep up to date with what we're building so that like if someone forges that minute, their rarity might change, right? And so obviously us being in the NFT world, knowing that rarity websites, for example, we keep in close touch with them, tell them to update that stuff as these things unfold. But as things evolve, we'll continue to basically stand on the feet of our of what we build rather than a blue tick, and then we'll push for that blue tick.
Also, I don't know when would be the appropriate time, but just brick boots.
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention that. Yeah, so brick boots. So do you want to say what they are, and I'll say how people get them? Yeah. So you might have. I'll jump into it. Yeah. So you might have seen our signature B stud. We've got our own brick. We're going to be bringing that into the metaverse as well, similar to like how RTFKT made that pod, the space pod, available to all of their holders as a little thank you. To anyone that is a Brickto holder and a Brain Boot holder, we're going to be making a brick boot available, which is just that, our signature brick as a shoe, kind of just like its own thing. And that's just a little way of saying thank you to anyone who's obviously been here since day one and supported us on that journey. So yeah, little side announcement, brick boots coming as well. So how we know if an upcoming trait in the Forge is rare or not? This is a debate I want to keep open in the Discord. We can decide right up until launch how we play it. I like the idea that outside of the ones that we've kind of shared on our socials, that a lot of the Forge traits are hidden and they get discovered as people unlock them. But obviously, if you're rolling the Forge, you're basically burning a brick, you probably want to know what you're going for. So I think this is an open forum and a conversation we'll continue to have. And if you want to have your say, be active in our community and let the mods know, let us know when we're online what you're thinking, because we're always receptive to feedback and want to do what's best by bricks. So this is a great question. If someone bumps into Brain Boots in the metaverse, how will they know it's related to Bricktopians? I think using Artifact as an example, they've obviously done their CloneX project, and CloneX is CloneX. And the Fuo shoe that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Brain Boots is the Fuo shoe. But both of those pieces build the macro brand and build the story. And everyone knows, even if you don't know, the reason that RTFKT is such a big brand is because of that, everything that they've built before and everything that they've built after drives new interest to their previous projects. It's this symbiotic relationship that keeps driving. And what's cool about the Brain Boot being such a unique design is it's a question prompt up. What is that? And that is how you actually introduce, what the fuck is a Brain Boot and why is it on fire? That's how you open that conversation, that dialogue, and bring more attention back to Bricktopians. So what is the total supply of Brain Boots? TBD. We're still going back and forth on the best way to play it. I personally want to do something that or both of us want to do what's kind of best for brick holders. But we had a Twitter space with NFT Kings. There's this interesting kind of duality where a higher supply often brings more people in, which is like a cool opportunity for
land bridge.
Yeah, it's a land bridge, which brings more people in for Bricktopians, but a lower supply makes it more scarce for holders. So I think that's another thing that we'll probably debate with the community, and we're open-minded to everything. It'll also depend on, there's a few that we're creating that we want to make particularly rare, and it's like, well, what makes sense based on how we assign the rarities to certain boots. How many traits slash animations will there be in the Brain Boots collection? Similarly to how we did the 4D, you'll notice almost every 4D trait is different from one another, even though mostly they're just bricks moving, right? So like a gulp is completely different from the popcorn 4D animation. And so when we're creating these, we do it in a way that makes sense so that everything kind of stands on its own 2 feet. We don't want to do red fire and then blue fire, for example, as like a cheap way of going, oh, that's different. We want everything to really
of conceptual space for them to stretch their legs into.
Yeah, exactly. So if you got a fire one, you feel special for having a fire one. You don't feel like it's diminished by another one that's next to it. So the answer to that question is it's still evolving. It's based on how we feel the diversity of the collection kind of erupts. And so what metaverse are we going to be able to wear the brain boots to start with? Will you partnership? Well, I'm going to link this to the next question. Will you do a partnership with any metaverse? So what's interesting is that obviously breaking into this space, it's such new ground. Many of the metaverses, so to speak, are like in their alpha phase, or they're just emerging. And so the way that we're approaching it is we are reaching out to basically like the head of partnerships at every metaverse and looking for the most seamless way to make what we're creating congruent in those worlds. Personally, I think Decentraland is the happiest medium and is the angle that we're pushing the most, because it's accessible, but it gives you a little bit more freedom than what like a sandbox might give you. But naturally, it's kind of where the eyeballs are, where the biggest players are, and what lets us honor the art in the best way. So for now, I'm going to say Decentraland, but it will depend on how these partnership conversations unfold. We've had a collection about price estimate on the brain boots and Futuretopians and other collections, and will they be separated apart? Basically, we're accelerating as quickly as possible to the forge. Then I'll talk about the separation first. Every project, we probably want to give it 2 weeks at least of oxygen, so that there's these constant marketing events that are happening. Like, can you imagine if we launched all projects on top of each other at once? Yeah, that would be a really exciting day, but then everyone would be like, that's it, and they'd move on. So we're playing this delicate balance of making sure that everything's spaced out enough that it keeps everyone excited, engaged. We want faster turnaround on things. That's why we build concurrently, but also not far enough apart that, yeah, people lose interest. So we will be spacing them out. In terms of pricing, we still are basically having conversations about it. It's just TBD. But effectively, we're thinking that Brickto holders will basically get a third of the price off, which we think will be a massive. Yeah. It's almost like an arbitrage against the floor of it, right? Yeah. Will we need to burn a brain boot to get one IRL? Basically, that was the original thinking. However, as this has evolved, why wouldn't you want to represent your digital self like your physical self, right? So we want the brain boot to be how you represent yourself online and to your friends, and them to play off each other in basically being a conversation starter. Because believe me, when you look at it, it is, and that's what we love about it. So current thinking is that no, you won't have to burn one. But I'm still open-minded to it, because if you haven't gathered by now, we love deflationary mechanisms, and we think that's a way of like consolidating interest in a project as it lives on over time. So I think this was the last question that I thought was a really good one to answer. What is required to forge your bricks? Just a gas fee, and will you be able to do it from a ledger-linked MetaMask? So that's a great question. This is a smart contract interaction. So like anything on the Ethereum blockchain, it will require a gas fee. Obviously, we're doing everything we can in the way that we design it to make it as low a gas fee as possible, but that's how we make it authenticated and secure and in the way that we would want to build it. And can you do it from a ledger-linked MetaMask account? So for context, that's how I'll be doing it. So hardware wallets, obviously through MetaMask, are great. And this for this mechanism, we'll be looking at adding more wallet integrations into it. So that was, a very long, detailed look at everything that we've got coming in the near term. I don't know about you lot. I'm super hyped about it. Like, this is going to be pretty massive for us. And naturally, in the Twitter Spaces way, like obviously we've gone for an hour, so want to try and wrap soon. But I think I'd love to get 3 questions up. Actually, we've got 4 here, so we'll get you 4 that you have requested. Let's get you guys up to ask a question, and then we'll wrap. But this has been amazing to share with you guys, and I'm so glad that we get to go into detail on this, because I think it's really important to have a. All right, cool. So hold on 1 second. I just had an alarm go off. So can you guys give me a thumbs up? down, that's yours. We don't own that. We still retain the right to basically create things based or share art based on all of them. But we want, in a perfect world, we want there to be everyone sharing their bricks, sharing other bricks, and just growing. Like, that's how we grow as a community. For the burned ones, they're all going to evolve into an animation that represents them as being burned. So it's super clear that they'll still retain the traits. They won't gain any new traits because we don't want them to move. We want them to almost be cemented in where they stand. But the graphic that is associated with them will represent that they're no longer accessible. So the way it will work is at the beginning, just so that we can make sure everything's working. And I think it's really important just because we need a safety net, is the smart contract effectively will enable you to choose which one you're burning, and that will send it to a treasury wallet. As long as everything's working correctly and we're basically triple checking everything, then what we'll do is do mass purges of these Bricktopians into the ether, into the null address, permanently making them irredeemable and verifiably removed from supply. So that in heaven, yeah, exactly. So your bricks, yeah, once you burn them, that's it. They're gone, and the artwork will be gone as well. So it's kind of this like beautiful, almost poetic thing, if you think about it, of these ones are quite literally being sacrificed so that the one you like can live on a new life. So yeah, that's how it works. I might call on Kushal now. And by the way, we've definitely got time for one more speaker if someone else wants to request.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Thank you for letting me come on the stage. First of all, I would like to say I truly love your project. I'm looking forward for the next drop. And my question is, there are a lot of scammers out there, and they're coming up with new and new ways to scam people. Just yesterday, Hypebears, there was a project Hypebears that was launched. They didn't launch their OpenSea profile for the first 5 minutes, and I think 100 or 80 80 volume was traded in that fake OpenSea account, as well as people minted from that. I mean, they bought it, like 20-50 pieces they bought, and that kept circulating. I know a lot of people, like a lot of projects, they try to make people aware, but I would like to know how differently you would approach this.
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, shout out to JB. JB is very close friends with Corso, who's one of the community managers at VFriends. If you don't know what VFriends is the NFT by Gary V, and one of the biggest NFT collections in the world. So we are basically getting direct help and direct consultation from one of the biggest collections in the world, the most robust, and the one with the biggest brand reputation, that they need to get everything right. We're actually really fortunate because we were actually tested ourselves recently. Some of you might not know this, but in this massive wave of Discords being attacked, we were attacked, I think like a couple of weeks ago, and through a web link to a moderator, someone was able to gain mod level access to our Discord and post a fake link. And if you want to know the way that we handled that, not only did we obviously stomp out the hacker within the hour and tighten up any loose ends, thank you Corso and all the advisory for helping us do that, we reimbursed all our Brickto holders who were hurt by the scam. And from what I understand, that's not normal for the space, and we can't understand why that wouldn't be normal. If something went wrong like that, where we can and where it's feasible, obviously we'll look after you and take responsibility. So one, we put so much love and care into looking after you guys and doing our best to protect you from scams. Obviously the scammers are smart and they try to find ways, whether it be DM bots or fake links on Twitter, all those sorts of things. My best recommendation to anyone that's listening is, as always, only click the official links in our Discord. Use secure services to store and favorite the links that we have, like whether it be our OpenSea collection, our website, the Forge website, etc. Always use the official links. But all I can say is that we're getting basically the highest quality service with helping protect our community. And we always look after you guys. And I think we definitely proved that when we reimbursed everyone who was hurt by that scammer that day. Cool. We actually don't have any more requests. So, or at least any that are showing up on my phone. Maybe the alarm clock kind of locked everyone out. But you guys know that we're around in the Discord. JB, Storm, Bob, and the rest of the mod team, and Krat, of course, they're our eyes and ears in there. And so while we're being mushrooms, absolutely grinding in the dark to bring this into the light, those guys relay everything to us. So please keep being engaged. Come say hi to us when we're in there hanging out. And yeah, oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to give Green and 5D the final move as, to have the floor, and then we're going to wrap up. Oh, we've got OX Napa as well. Cool. I'm going to have to do a second sign off then. The mountain that we're climbing there. And what's exciting is that as we hit the standards of quality that we're happy with, that if you've seen any of like the crypto bulls or like these primate planets of the world, they are, let's be real, like inherently what's exciting about them is the art is very a leap forward on what we've seen previously. So this is very much a free collectible plus our artistic way of showing a new ladder that we're climbing and something that hasn't been done before. And then the utility that we're bringing into it is how can we bring it back into bricks and make them burnable for different forge trades that aren't accessible through the traditional means. And then in terms of 4D, it all depends on what we can pull off in the time frame, but we're looking at how we can maybe bring some of those animals into interacting with some of the brain boot animations, which further brings in that tie-in world that we've been talking about, where everything relates to everything, and even of course like having a Brickto inspired brain boot animation too. Everything links to everything. So yeah, for this at this stage, not 4D, but different mountains to be climbed.
Sick. Thank you so much, Alex. Man, I love how infinite and how tentacle like this project is. So thank you guys so much. Y'all are doing great.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Law says tentacular. Yeah, every time I add someone, it seems to be me that disconnects them. So I'm gonna say, Crack, can you please let up Nifty Hustle? Also, just while you're here, so you guys would notice I'm doing this from my Preposterous Alex account this time. The idea with this account is that we're trying to, Laura and I are trying to grow ourselves essentially as people who are thinking in these ways, and maybe connect to people who might not have connected to bricks before. And so you guys would have seen that with me trying to connect more with the Bored Ape Yacht Club and like all the people in that world. And that's basically what we're doing here. We're trying to bring in new audiences into our brick audience and share the love with everyone. So now we've got Nifty Hustle here. If you want to jump in, love to hear what you got to say.
Yeah, for sure. I just have one quick question. I heard everything and I really appreciate all the information and having the spaces tonight. I do have just one quick question. So for future, say, utility for, the Bricktopians, the brain boots and whatnot and everything else that's coming in the future, I know at this point, like it's like visual, like how do I say, like I know it's like basically the question is like, will there be any kind of future utility in terms of like at this point it's more visual, right? What I'm trying to say, like everything that's that you're doing, and it's very like appealing. I just want to know if there's any like future utility in terms of, I don't know, maybe some sort of gaming or metaverse plays on top of the the brain boots being a wearable, or is that more so like a brand that's going to be in the metaverse, like Balenciaga, like that you mentioned before? Is that going to be more so like that term, or basically what I'm trying to say is like future utility in terms of things that, how do I say it?
Yeah, you mean like as in like expanding
Yeah,
the
like,
usage of it. Yeah.
Yeah, expanding usage and growing on top of that per se. Like
Yeah. So I think like the way I've described this in the past, and like many of you will have heard me say exactly this, and Law hates this because it's off brand for us, but I think it's a good analogy for explaining what we do. That like this is more or less like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Yeah, like he's even cringing hearing me say it. But this is like the Marvel Cinematic Universe in which we there are like adjacent projects to each other that obviously link into each other. But there's adjacent projects in that there's like Iron Man, Captain America, the Avengers. Sorry, Law. And then, but within those, obviously, like there's Iron Man 1, there's Iron Man 2, there's Iron Man 3. And so we're always going to build on Bricktopians. We're always going to add new usability on the Brain Boot. Like right now, Decentraland, for example, won't let you have it on Fire, but with Unreal Engine and like where that's going, we can actually add some serious firepower to how those are used aesthetically in the future. And so I think that's more so how we're building on each project, is adding new layers, adding the Forge, adding whether it be a second brick collection that is for free, but it takes a completely different direction, like is metaverse compatible or whatever. There are lots of ways that we can continue to add layers to it. I think there are lots of projects doing cool things. Like I really like Creature World by Danny Cole. Like he's built this like his own little metaverse, like this little world for the NFT holders that there's like a story that they can participate in, and you can only get through certain layers if you actually hold the NFT. We're world builders, so like we're going to continue to add new layers, but in the way that makes sense for where the culture is at. I think a mistake we maybe made last year is the space moves so quickly that committing to certain things like a year in advance, for example, can get you into a position where you profess something that isn't relevant because no one saw music NFTs coming or wearables coming or metaverse real estate is now obviously popping off, as we all know. We're going to be adaptable to what the currents of the world show us. But yeah, we're open to gamification, world building, our own little metaverse, all those sorts of things are definitely down the line. But right now, we have to focus on exactly what's in front of us because that's what's going to build everything. Also, shout out Topians as an idea. Just putting that out there. May, June 2022. No.
Awesome, man. So essentially, Bricktopians is the genesis, and things will be built on top of it. And basically, as the space moves forward, you will adjust towards that, and essentially, build on top of that or take advantage or in that regard, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome.
Like
because
we
can't predict anything that's going to happen in the future, right? So
yeah. So like
being on top of it is the most that we can do. Say.
Yeah, so like, and that's why when we released the roadmap, we called it I think it was the February-March roadmap, because it makes so much more sense to do big, exciting things that are obviously going to be relevant in that time span. Like when we built Bricktopians the first time, when you're actually building this stuff, and I'm sure you guys feel this too, when you're like collecting these things or keeping up with new collections that come out, it feels like everything is moving at the speed of light. And in our opinion, the only way to stay ahead of it or build things that outpace it or are truly revolutionary. Like we were the first 4D collection. Now you see things
500 hours of render.
500 hours. You see things like Invisible Friends popping up, and now other people are creating walking NFTs. Like there's always these little things that kind of leave their new stamp on the movement. And so our perspective on how to build on this is to basically do like the maths equation of what is preposterously difficult and challenging and technically complex but incredible, whilst what could people do in the time frame that we're trying to pull it off in. And as long as we keep doing that mathematical equation, we're going to do things that are far ahead of anything else that is in the space. And I don't know about you guys, I got a chip on my shoulder in terms of I feel like we're under recognized for what we've created. I think we were born in a period of a bit of a lull in that like November period where people took their eye off the ball on NFTs, and now everyone's looking at the hot new thing. Well, that's what's great about creating adjacent things, because then we can create the hot new thing and put it into our Brickto world. So Laura and I are definitely motivated almost to get back at the universe of NFTs and put our stamp on really what we believe is some of the highest quality work that's been produced. And we both stand behind that 100%.
Dragon Blood Energy.
Dragon Blood Energy, exactly. So I think that's a nice note to end on. Thanks for jumping up, Nifty Hustle. And yeah, shout out to you guys, because we've got some big things on the way, obviously. So stay along for the ride. We swing for the fences, and we hope you want to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to everything happening. And yeah, just keep killing it, guys. Just keep killing it, man.